I never thought, not even in my darkest nights, that the man I married would become the truth that broke me in half. Some wounds don't fade. Time just teaches you how to carry them without falling apart. And some wounds you don't even know are bleeding until someone points to the ground and says, "Look, you're leaving a trail of blood everywhere you go." That's what happened to me. I was only 19 years old when it all began. Too young, too naive, believing that love could fix anything. I was one of those girls who still daydreamed, who pressed flowers between the pages of books, who believed in fate. You know that feeling that life is going to hand you exactly what you deserve? Well, I believed that with blind faith. That's when I met Thomas Miller. He was different from the other boys in town. He had a quiet way about him, but gentle. He didn't talk much, but when he did, every word mattered. The kind of man who looked you in the eyes and made you feel truly seen. He treated everyone with respect, but with me he had a special kind of care. Like I was made of fine china. I fell in love without even realizing it. It happened slowly, like rain that soaks you without making a sound. We married fast, the simple way people did in small southern towns back then. A borrowed dress from my cousin, a sheet cake made by the church ladies, flowers picked from my aunt's garden. The ceremony was in a little chapel with creaking wooden pews and the smell of candle wax in the air. That night, when he held my hand at the door of the house that would be ours, I thought God had written my destiny in golden ink. I thought I was safe. I thought nothing bad could reach me when I was standing beside him. But the truth is, you're never safe from anything. You just think you are. And when life decides to pull the rug out from under your feet, it doesn't warn you, doesn't send a letter, doesn't give you time to take a deep breath first. Many years passed. Good years, mostly. We built a life together. Nothing fancy? No. It was simple. But it was ours. He worked at Benson's Auto Repair, and I kept the house, did some sewing on the side, helped out at the farmer's market on Saturdays. We laughed together, rarely fought, slept holding hands. I thought I knew that man inside and out. But there are things buried so deep that even the person carrying them doesn't know they're there. Until one day, already a grown woman, already with aching joints and graying hair, already with sunspots on my face and weariness in my eyes, I heard a sentence. A simple sentence. But it turned my world upside down. A sentence that took the air from my lungs, that made my heart beat so slow I thought it might stop. It was on a Thursday afternoon. Cloudy sky, the smell of rain coming. I was sitting on the porch at Mrs. Jacob's house, an elderly woman who'd known everyone in town since before I was born. She was going through old boxes, the cardboard kind where you keep old photos, certificates, keepsakes nobody looks at anymore. Suddenly, she stopped, stood there staring at a yellowed photograph, and said, more to herself than to me, "Poor thing, your mama. What they did to her that day was inhuman." I froze. "What do you mean, Mrs. Jacobs?" She lifted her eyes to me, and I saw fear. Fear that she'd said too much. "Nothing, honey. Old business. Best leave it be." But I couldn't leave it. Couldn't. That sentence lodged itself in my chest like a splinter and stayed there, burning. What did they do to my mama? She swallowed hard, closed the box, and when she looked at me again, her eyes were wet. "Sweetheart, some things are better left alone. Some wounds have already healed, and we don't gain anything by opening them again." But I couldn't stop, because for the first time in my life, I realized something was wrong. Something everyone knew except me. Something my mama never told me. Something my daddy took to his grave. Something Mrs. Jacobs kept like a secret. And that somehow, in a way I didn't yet understand, had to do with me and with Thomas. I went home that day with a weight in my chest I'd never felt before. I looked at my husband sleeping in the porch hammock, and for the first time in all those years, I felt afraid of him. Not afraid he'd hurt me, no. Afraid of discovering something that would change everything. And that's when I started asking questions. Questions about the day I was born, about the maternity ward, about the nurse my mama never wanted to see again, about the baby who, according to a distant aunt, didn't make it. And the more I asked, the more silence I received, until the day the truth exploded in my face. And when it exploded, my God, when it exploded, I understood why they'd hidden it from me my entire life. Because some truths destroy, and mine destroyed everything. I need to take you back a little so you understand properly. Because the story of Thomas and me, it started in a pure place. In a place where nothing seemed wrong, where everything was just beautiful. It was 1962. I'd just turned 19. I lived with my parents in a simple house, 3 rooms, at the end of Main Street in a tiny town outside Savannah, Georgia. My daddy worked for the railroad, and my mama sewed for folks in town. We didn't have much, but we never went without. It was that ordinary small-town life, you know? Where everybody knows everybody, where you leave your door unlocked and borrow sugar from the neighbor. Back then, what got young people excited was the county fair. It happened once a month, in the town square, under the big oak trees. They'd set up a wooden stage, hang colored lights in the branches, and the band would play those slow, romantic songs that made you dream. I never missed a single one, not even if it rained. It was at one of those dances on a September night that I met Thomas. I remember everything about that night, even now. The smell of hot popcorn mixed with the smell of damp earth from the rain that had fallen earlier. The crickets singing loud. The sky full of stars, the way you only see them in the country, far from city lights. I'd gone wearing a peach-colored dress my mama had sewn from leftover fabric. Nothing fancy, but I felt pretty. I'd even put on a little lipstick my cousin lent me. When the band started playing, I was standing near the dessert table, talking with the girls. And that's when he appeared. Thomas. He was tall. Not very, but enough that I had to lift my face a bit to look into his eyes. He had dark hair, neatly combed, and wore a white shirt that looked new. But what struck me most was his manner. He didn't come with that arrogance boys usually had. He came carefully, almost shy. "Good evening," he said, his voice low, respectful. "Would you care to dance with me?" I laughed, because he called me ma'am, like I was somebody important. "I'm not a ma'am, mister. I'm just Grace." He smiled. And that smile, my God. That smile lit something inside me I didn't even know existed. Well then, would Grace dance with me? I said yes. When he took my hand, I felt my heart race. His hand was firm but gentle, like he was afraid of squeezing too hard. The music was slow, and he guided me so smoothly I felt like I was floating. In the middle of the dance, he leaned in close and whispered near my ear, "If you'll let me, tonight, I'd like to dance only with you." I was speechless, because nobody had ever treated me that way, with that respect, with that attention. We danced all night, and when the fair ended, he walked me home. He didn't try anything, didn't ask for a kiss, didn't try to hold my hand beyond what was proper. He just said, "Thank you for tonight, Grace. It was the best night of my life." And he left. I walked into the house floating. But there was a moment I didn't pay attention to at the time, but that later came back to haunt me. Mama asked me, "What's his name?" "Thomas. Thomas Miller." My mama stopped her needlework, sat there staring at the thread in her hand, like she'd forgotten what she was doing. "Thomas," she repeated quietly. "That name. I've heard it somewhere before." "Oh, Mama, everybody knows everybody here. That's probably it." She didn't answer, just went back to sewing, but differently. Slower, more thoughtful. I didn't pay it any mind. I was too in love to care. And that was my first mistake. I need to take you back a little further so you can really understand. Because the story of Thomas and me, it started in a pure place, in a place where nothing seemed wrong, where everything was just beautiful. It was 1962. I'd just turned 19. I lived with my parents in a simple house, 3 bedrooms at the end of Main Street in our little town just outside Savannah, Georgia. My daddy worked at the railroad depot, and my mama sewed dresses for ladies in town. We didn't have much, but we never went without. It was that quiet southern life, you know, where everybody knows everybody, where you leave your screen door unlocked and bring your neighbor a casserole when they're sick. Back in those days, what got young folks excited was the county fair. It happened once a month, right there in the town square, under those big oak trees dripping with Spanish moss. They'd set up a wooden stage, string-colored lights through the branches, and the local band would play those slow, sweet songs that made your heart ache in the best way. I never missed one. Rain or shine, it was at one of those fairs, on a warm September evening, that I met Thomas. I remember everything about that night, every single detail. The smell of hot buttered popcorn mixing with the scent of honeysuckle and fresh-cut grass. The fireflies blinking in the dusk, the sky turning from orange to purple to deep blue, with stars appearing one by one like God was lighting candles just for us. I'd worn a yellow sundress my mama had made from fabric she got on sale at Turner's Dry Goods. Nothing fancy, but I felt pretty in that simple way country girls do. I'd even borrowed a little tube of coral lipstick from my cousin Betty. When the band started up, I was standing near the lemonade stand with some girlfriends, giggling and watching the boys work up the courage to ask us to dance. And that's when he appeared. Thomas. He was tall, not towering, but enough that I had to tilt my chin up to meet his eyes. His hair was dark and neatly combed, and he wore a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. But what really got me was the way he carried himself. Not cocky like some of the other boys, just careful, almost shy. "Evening, ma'am," he said, his voice soft and respectful. Would you do me the honor of dancing with me?" I laughed because he called me ma'am like I was some fine lady instead of just Grace Harper, the railroad man's daughter. "I'm no ma'am, mister. Just Grace." He smiled then. And Lord, that smile lit up something inside me I didn't even know was there. "Well then, Miss Grace, would you dance with me?" I said yes. When he took my hand, my heart just about jumped out of my chest. His hand was warm and steady, but gentle, like he was afraid I might break if he held too tight. The music was slow, and he moved so smoothly I felt like I was floating above the grass instead of standing on it. Halfway through the song, he leaned in close and whispered near my ear, "If you don't mind, I'd like to spend the whole evening dancing with just you." I didn't trust myself to speak, because nobody had ever made me feel that way before. Special, chosen, like I mattered. We danced until the band packed up, and when the fair was over, he walked me all the way home, even though it was a good mile and a half. He didn't try to kiss me, didn't even try to hold my hand beyond what was proper. He just walked beside me in the moonlight and told me about the stars. At my front gate, he tipped his head and said, "Thank you, Miss Grace. Tonight was the finest evening of my life." And then he was gone, disappearing down the dark road. I floated into the house. My mama was still up, mending a hem by lamplight. When she saw my face, she smiled. "Well now, looks like somebody had a good time." "I did," I said, trying to hide my grin and failing miserably. She laughed softly. But then there was a moment I didn't think anything of at the time, but that later haunted me like a ghost. She asked, real casual-like, "What's his name?" Thomas Miller." My mama's needle stopped mid-stitch. She sat there staring at the fabric in her lap like she'd forgotten what she was doing. "Thomas," she repeated, barely above a whisper. "I feel like I've heard that name before." "Oh, Mama, you probably have. Everybody knows everybody in this town." She didn't say anything else, just went back to her sewing, but slower now, more careful, like her mind was somewhere far away. I didn't think much of it. I was too full of butterflies and moonlight to notice anything strange. In the days that followed, Thomas started coming around. He'd bring me wildflowers from the roadside, walk with me to the post office, sit on our porch, and talk to me while my daddy watched from the window. He was polite to everyone. Tipped his hat to my daddy, helped my mama carry in groceries, never overstayed his welcome. But there was something I found odd, though at the time I just brushed it aside. Every time I asked about his family, he'd change the subject, quick as lightning, like he was running from something. "Thomas, tell me about your mama. What's she like?" "Oh, she's kind, but I'd rather not talk about the past much, Grace. What matters is right now." "What about your daddy?" His face would go hard, almost cold. "Never knew my father. I didn't push, because I could see it hurt him, and I didn't want to cause him pain. But then one day, sitting on a bench in the town square, he told me something that seemed just sad at the time. But later it became a piece of a nightmare puzzle. We were holding hands, watching kids chase each other around the fountain, when he said, "Grace, I'm not the blood son of the woman who raised me." I looked at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" He took a deep breath. "She found me when I was just a baby, behind the Greyhound bus station in Macon. Somebody left me there, and she took me in, raised me as her own." My heart broke for him. "Oh, Thomas, you're a survivor." He smiled, but it was a sad smile. "Sometimes I wonder, who were my real parents? Why did they abandon me? Are they still alive somewhere?" I squeezed his hand tight. "It doesn't matter. What matters is you're here, and I found you." He looked at me with those deep, grateful eyes. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Grace." And I believed it with every fiber of my being. But if I'd known then what I'd discover years later, I would have run. I would have screamed. I would have stopped what was coming. But I didn't know. And fate is cruel to those who don't know. The weeks turned to months. Thomas kept courting me proper. We'd take long walks down dirt roads, share ice cream at Miller's drugstore, no relation, he'd always joke, sit in church side by side on Sunday mornings. My mama watched us, watched him, and I started noticing something in her eyes when she looked at Thomas. Something I couldn't quite name, not suspicion exactly, more like recognition, like she was trying to remember something important, something buried. One Sunday after church, she pulled me aside while Thomas was talking to the Reverend. "Grace, honey," she said, her voice tight, "how much do you really know about that boy?" "I know enough, Mama. I know he's good and kind and he loves me." She bit her lip, like she was wrestling with words that wanted to come out. "It's just, there's something about him, something I can't quite put my finger on, something familiar." "Mama, you're imagining things." She looked at me for a long moment, then sighed. Maybe I am. But I saw it in her eyes. She wasn't imagining anything. She knew something she couldn't or wouldn't say. And that something was waiting in the shadows, waiting to destroy us all. We got married 6 months after that fair. 6 months that flew by like a dream. 6 months of evening walks, front porch conversations, and plans for the future. I embroidered dish towels and pillowcases for our hope chest, and Thomas saved every penny he earned at Benson's auto repair. We dreamed of a little house with a picket fence, children running through the yard, a simple and happy life. And that's exactly what we got. Simple. The ceremony was on a Saturday afternoon in the same little First Baptist church where my parents had married. There weren't many people. Close family, a few friends, our nearest neighbors. My dress was borrowed from my cousin Lord's, and the veil had belonged to my grandmother. Thomas wore a gray suit he'd bought at the Goodwill and had tailored to fit. When he saw me walking down that aisle, I saw his eyes shine. And when we exchanged rings, when Reverend Patterson said, "You may kiss your bride." I felt like nothing bad could ever touch me. But there was a moment, a small moment, almost invisible, that only made sense years later. Right after the ceremony, as we were taking pictures on the church steps, Thomas's adoptive mother arrived. Mrs. Dorothy Carter, a tiny woman with gray hair pinned in a tight bun, always clutching a rosary in her weathered hands. She wore a brown dress, very plain, and carried a wrapped package. "My children," she said, her voice catching. "May the Lord bless this union." She hugged us both. But when she hugged Thomas, she held on longer, squeezed him tight. And I heard her whisper something in his ear. I couldn't catch all of it, but I heard a few words. "Forgive me. I tried. It wasn't supposed to be like this." Thomas went stiff, pale, but then he pulled away and smiled like nothing had happened. "It's all right, Mama. Everything's all right." I thought it was strange, but I didn't ask. After all, it was my wedding day. I didn't want to spoil it with suspicion. After the reception, we moved into a little rental house near downtown. 2 small rooms, a kitchen out back, an outhouse in the yard. It wasn't much, but it was ours. And I made that place a home. I sewed curtains, painted the walls cream white, planted mint in clay pots on the windowsill. Life went on. Thomas worked Monday through Saturday at the garage. I kept house, took in laundry for extra money, made preserves to sell at the farmer's market. We didn't have luxury, but we had peace. Until, a few months later, I started getting to know Mrs. Carter better. She came to visit every week. Always brought something, a slice of pound cake, some tomatoes from her garden, a crocheted potholder. She was a sweet woman, quiet. But I noticed she trembled whenever certain subjects came up. One day, I was helping her sort through some old boxes she'd brought over to store in our back room. They were full of old things, baby clothes, yellowed blankets, little wooden toys. "Was this Thomas's when he was little?" I asked, picking up a faded stuffed rabbit. She froze. Her face went white. Her hands started shaking. Yes, it was," she said, but her voice came out weak, uncertain. I kept looking through the box, innocently. I pulled out an old birth certificate, edges torn and yellowed. "Oh, look how sweet. Here's his name right here." But when I started to read it, she snatched the paper from my hands, hard, desperate. "No, that doesn't need looking at, honey. Leave it be." I was shocked, because she'd never been sharp with me before. Never. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter. I didn't mean to." She took a deep breath, clutched the rosary in her pocket, and forced a smile. "No, dear. I'm sorry. It's just, going through these old things makes me nervous. Too many bad memories." She packed everything up quickly, closed the box, and changed the subject. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Why? Why did she react like that? That night, I asked Thomas, "Honey, your mama gets real strange when anyone talks about her past. Did something happen?" He was lying in bed, his back to me. He took a long time to answer. "Grace, my mama suffered a lot in life, lost people, went through things she'd rather forget. Best not to dig, all right? But what about your adoption? How did it really happen?" He turned to face me, and for the first time, I saw anger in his eyes. Not anger at me, anger at something bigger. "I already told you. They found me behind the bus station. Abandoned baby. My mama took me in. End of story. There's nothing else to know." "But Thomas, Grace, for God's sake!" He raised his voice. "Stop it. I don't want to talk about it. Not ever." I went cold, because he'd never yelled at me before. Never. He realized it, sighed, ran his hand over his face. "I'm sorry. It's hard for me. You understand?" I understood, or I thought I did. I thought he was just ashamed, hurt. I thought it was just the pain of abandonment, but it wasn't. It was something else, something much, much worse. And things got even stranger when months later my mama came over for Sunday dinner. It was the first time she and Thomas would spend real time together, sitting at the same table. When she arrived, I hugged her, excited, but she was serious, looking at Thomas with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not anger, not suspicion. It was like she was seeing a ghost. "Mama, you all right?" She blinked quickly, forced a smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart, just fine." But during dinner, she barely ate, just watched, observed. And when Thomas stepped outside to fetch water from the pump, she grabbed my arm hard. "Grace," she whispered, her eyes wet. "Are you sure he is who he says he is?" I frowned. "What do you mean, Mama?" She glanced at the door, afraid of being heard. That face, the way he moves. I swear I know him, but I don't know from where. "Oh, Mama, stop it. He probably just reminds you of someone in town." She shook her head, anguished. "No, honey, it's not that. It's like I've known him before, from long ago." Thomas came back in that moment. She let go of my arm and went quiet. But I saw it. I saw the way she looked at him, like she was trying to remember something. Something important, something terrible. And that's when I started feeling that something was very wrong. Something hidden beneath years of silence. And that sooner or later, it was going to surface. The weeks turned into months, and I tried to push the feeling away. I focused on being a good wife, on cooking Thomas's favorite meals, fried chicken, collard greens, cornbread, on keeping the house spotless, on being cheerful when he came home tired from work. But the feeling wouldn't leave. It sat in my chest like a stone. And every time I looked at my mama, every time Mrs. Carter visited, every time Thomas avoided talking about his past, the stone grew heavier. One afternoon, I was hanging laundry in the backyard when Mrs. Carter stopped by unannounced. She looked pale, tired, like she hadn't slept in days. "Grace, honey," she said quietly. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" "Of course, Mrs. Carter. Come sit." We sat on the back steps. She twisted the hem of her apron in her hands, nervous. "I need to tell you something," she began. "Something I should have said a long time ago." My heart started pounding. "What is it?" She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, and then tears started falling. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't do it. God forgive me, but I can't." "Mrs. Carter, you're scaring me." She stood up abruptly. "I have to go. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." And she left. Just like that. Leaving me sitting there with my heart in my throat and 1,000 questions burning in my mind. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay beside Thomas, listening to him breathe, and I felt it again. That feeling. That something terrible was waiting, and it was only a matter of time before it found us. The months kept passing, and Thomas and I settled into the rhythm of married life. Waking up early, coffee percolating on the stove, him heading off to the garage, me tending to the house. It was a good life. Simple, but good. But there was one thing that started weighing heavy on my heart. The longing to be a mother. Every time I saw a pregnant woman walking past or a baby in a neighbor's arms, my chest would ache. I wanted that, wanted to hold my own child, wanted to smell that sweet baby smell, feel that weight in my arms, have that sense that life had a bigger purpose. And Thomas wanted it too. His eyes would light up whenever he talked about it. "Grace, just imagine when we have our little one. I'm going to teach him to ride a bike, throw a baseball, and you'll make those little apple pies you make so well." I'd smile, and we tried. We tried hard, but the months kept passing. And nothing. At first, I didn't worry. I figured it was normal for it to take a while. But after a year, I started getting anxious. Was something wrong with me? Could I not get pregnant? Finally, a neighbor lady, Mrs. Perkins, suggested I go to the county health clinic for some tests. "Go on, honey. Sometimes it's just a little thing that's easy to fix." I convinced Thomas, and we went. On a Tuesday morning, real early, we caught the bus to the clinic. There were lots of folks waiting. Smell of rubbing alcohol, sound of babies crying, people coughing. But we waited patiently. When they called us back, we were seen by a young nurse with short dark hair and round glasses. She was friendly, efficient, asked us questions, drew some blood, took our blood pressure. "Y'all come back in a week to get the results, all right?" We agreed. I left there feeling hopeful, thinking we'd soon find out what was stopping us, get it fixed, and before long I'd be expecting. But when we went back a week later, that's when things started getting strange. The same nurse called us into a small examination room, closed the door. She laid the papers on the desk and looked at them with a confused expression. "So," she began, adjusting her glasses. "Your tests came back normal, overall. Nothing that would prevent pregnancy." I breathed a sigh of relief. "Oh, thank goodness. So we just keep trying, right?" She didn't answer right away, just kept staring at the papers, frowning. "Well, but there's something here that caught my attention." My heart jumped. "What?" She looked at me, then at Thomas, then back at the papers. "Mrs. Miller, have you ever been pregnant before?" My eyes went wide. "No, never. Why would you ask me that?" She pointed at one of the test results. "It's just that here, there are some markings on the uterus, markings we usually only see in women who've already had children, sometimes even in cases of complicated delivery or twin pregnancy." I couldn't understand. But that's impossible. I've never had a child, never lost a baby, never been pregnant in my life." She scratched her head, confused. "Strange, very strange indeed." Thomas, who'd been quiet up until then, shifted in his chair. I looked at him. He was pale, sweating, his hands trembling. "Honey, you all right?" I asked. He swallowed hard. Yeah, I'm fine." But he wasn't. I could tell he wasn't. The nurse continued. "Look, it might be some kind of anomaly. Could be something you were born with. I'm gonna write this down so y'all can see a specialist, okay? But don't worry, it's nothing that should prevent pregnancy." We left there, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Markings on my uterus? How? I'd never been pregnant, never lost a baby, never had any procedures. How could I have markings from childbirth? That night, lying in bed, I turned to Thomas. "Honey, didn't you think what the nurse said was strange?" He had his back to me. Took a long time to answer. "I did, but it's probably just a mistake in the test." "You think?" He didn't respond. I pressed on. "Thomas, do you think there could be something in my family, some kind of condition, something my mama never told me about?" He turned abruptly. "Grace, stop!" His voice came out loud, angry. "Stop thinking about it. You're obsessing. The nurse said everything's fine, so everything's fine." I went quiet, scared, because he'd never spoken to me that way before. Never. He realized it, took a deep breath, rubbed his face. "I'm sorry. It's just, I'm tired. Had a rough day at the shop." He turned his back again and pretended to sleep. But I saw it. I saw his body tense. I saw his breathing fast, uneven. He was hiding something, or afraid of something. In the days that followed, I started noticing other things. Small things. Things that alone didn't mean much, but together. Together, they painted a strange picture. Like, every time I mentioned my childhood, or asked about the maternity hospital where I was born, my mama would change the subject. Quick, with that look of someone hiding something. Or like, every time Mrs. Carter came to visit and I talked about wanting children, her eyes would fill with tears. Like it hurt her. Like she knew something I didn't. And worst of all, every time I looked at Thomas lately, I felt like he was carrying a weight. A huge weight. Something he wanted to tell me but couldn't. Until one Sunday morning, I decided to visit my mama alone, without warning, without calling ahead. When I got there, she was sitting on the porch, sewing. She saw me and jumped, surprised. "Grace, what are you doing here?" "Came to visit. Can't I?" "Of course you can, honey." It's just, you never come without calling first. I sat beside her, took her hand. Mama, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. She went tense. I saw her body stiffen. What is it, sweetheart? I took a deep breath. I was born at St. Mary's Hospital, right? The one that used to be near the bus station? She went white. The needle slipped from her hand. Why are you asking? I just want to make sure. Was it there? She looked at the floor, at the sky, anywhere but at me. It was, yes. And was there anyone else born there the same day as me? Any cousin? Anyone you know? Her hands started trembling. She stood up fast, nearly knocking over her chair. Why are you asking me this? Who told you to ask this? I stood too, startled. Nobody told me, Mama. I'm just trying to understand some things. What things? Things that don't make sense. Things that everybody seems to know except me. She looked at me with eyes full of tears. And for the first time in my life, I saw my mother. Afraid. Afraid of me. Afraid of the truth. Grace, she whispered, her voice breaking. Some things are better left unknown. Some things we bury to protect the people we love. I felt a chill run down my spine. Mama, what are you hiding from me? She shook her head, crying now. I can't, honey. I can't tell you. I promised I never would. Promised who? She didn't answer, just turned and went inside the house, closing the door behind her. I stood there, frozen in the middle of the porch, with my heart racing out of control, with the absolute certainty that something terrible had happened, and that for some reason, everybody was protecting this secret. Everybody except me. I walked back home in a daze, my mind spinning, my chest tight. When I got there, Thomas was sitting on our porch, whittling a piece of wood with his pocket knife. He looked up and smiled. Hey there, darlin'. Where'd you go? I couldn't smile back. Just went to see Mama. He studied my face. Everything all right? No, I said quietly. Nothing's all right. He set down the knife. What happened? I looked at him. Really looked at him. At the man I'd married. The man I loved. The man who suddenly felt like a stranger. Thomas, is there something you're not telling me? His face changed. Just for a second. Fear flickered in his eyes. What do you mean? About your past. About where you came from. About us. He stood up. Grace, we've been over this. No, I interrupted. We haven't. You've avoided it. Everyone's avoided it. But I'm not avoiding it anymore. I need to know the truth. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he said quietly, Some truths destroy people, Grace. And he walked past me into the house, leaving me standing there, absolutely knowing that the truth was coming, whether I was ready for it or not. I went back inside that day with my soul turned inside out. I couldn't get my mama's reaction out of my head. The desperation in her eyes, the way she'd fled from the conversation, like I'd touched an open wound that had never properly healed. I tried to move forward, tried to pretend everything was normal, but it wasn't. Something inside me had awakened, a restlessness, a need to understand. And that's when life, in its strange way, put an opportunity right in front of me to discover more. About 2 months after that conversation with my mama, Thomas started feeling poorly. Nothing too serious at first. Low-grade fever, headache, tiredness. I made him tea, gave him home remedies, but nothing helped. Until one night, the fever spiked high. He was burning up, delirious, saying things that made no sense. I panicked. Thomas, we need to get you to a hospital, now. He tried to refuse, but he was too weak to argue. I called our neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, who had a truck, and he rushed us to the nearest hospital. Only the clinic in town was closed that night. Generator trouble, they said. and the nearest hospital was in the next county over. St. Mary's in Brunswick, the same town where the old maternity ward was, where I'd been born. When we got there, it was close to midnight. The hospital was old. Peeling paint, strong smell of disinfectant, yellow lights flickering in the hallways. But it was all we had. They took Thomas in quickly, ran tests, gave him IV fluids, medication. Said it was a serious infection, but he'd be fine. While he rested on a gurney, I went to the restroom to wash my face. I was exhausted, scared. When I came back to the hallway, I stood there looking around. And that's when I realized this hospital was the same place where I'd been born. St. Mary's had been a maternity hospital back in the day, then converted to a general hospital years ago. But the building was the same. The walls, the corridors, even that slightly sweet smell of medicine mixed with must. Everything matched what my mama had described once. I stood there, staring, and a strange feeling washed over me. Like that place held secrets, like the walls knew something I didn't. That's when an elderly woman in hospital whites passed by me. She must have been in her 70s, completely gray hair pulled back in a low bun, worn uniform but clean. She carried a clipboard and walked slowly, her back curved from the weight of years. When she passed me, she looked at my face and stopped cold, like she'd seen a ghost. "Miss," she said, her voice trembling, who are you the daughter of?" I frowned, surprised. "I'm the daughter of Louise Harper." "Why?" Her face went even paler. "Louise?" she repeated, almost whispering. "Louise Harper from Savannah?" "That's right. Do you know her?" The woman swallowed hard. Her hands started shaking. She looked around, like she was afraid of being heard. "I knew her a long time ago." I felt my heart speed up. "Did you work in the maternity ward when I was born?" She didn't answer right away, just stood there looking at me like she was deciding whether to speak or not. "I did. Worked here many years. Saw many things I shouldn't have seen." I stepped closer to her. "What did you see?" She looked over her shoulder again, nervous. Then she grabbed my arm and pulled me into a darker corner of the hallway, away from other people. "Miss," she said, her voice low, urgent. "Your husband, what's his name?" I froze. Thomas Miller." "Why?" She closed her eyes, clutched the clipboard to her chest. "Oh, my Lord. Lord have mercy. What? Do you know him?" She opened her eyes again, and I saw tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "I shouldn't say. I swore I'd never say. But, good God, you two here, together. This ain't right." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" She grabbed my hands. Her hands were cold, trembling. "Miss, there's something that happened here, many years ago. Something wrong. Very wrong." "What?" She opened her mouth to answer, but at that moment a loud voice echoed down the corridor. "Miss Beatrice, what are you doing over there?" It was a younger woman in a white coat, stern-faced. Must have been a supervisor or something. She came walking quickly toward us. Miss Beatrice let go of me immediately, frightened. "Nothing, Mrs. Henderson. Just helping this lady here." Mrs. Henderson looked at me with suspicion, then at Miss Beatrice. "You know you're not supposed to be chatting with visitors. Get back to your station." "Yes, ma'am." Miss Beatrice started to walk away, but before she left, she looked at me one more time and whispered, so quietly I almost didn't hear, "Look for the records from the year 1962. And she hurried off, disappearing down the hallway. I stood there, paralyzed. Records from 1962? But 1962 was the year I was born. What was in those records? The supervisor looked me up and down. "Are you here with someone?" "Yes, my husband's admitted." "Then get back to his room, and don't go bothering the staff." She turned and walked away. I went back to the room where Thomas was. He was sleeping, still feverish. I sat in the chair beside his gurney and stared at him. And for the first time I looked at his face with fear. Fear of what? I didn't know. But something inside me screamed that there was a connection between me, him, this hospital, and the secret my mama was keeping. I needed to find out. The next morning, when Thomas was discharged, we went home. He was better, but still weak. I took care of him lovingly, but my mind wouldn't stop spinning. Records from 1962. What was in them? I needed to go back to that hospital. Needed to find Miss Beatrice again. Needed to understand what she'd tried to tell me. And that's exactly what I did. A week later, I made up an excuse for Thomas, said I was going to visit a sick cousin, and caught the bus back to Brunswick. When I got to the hospital, it was mid-afternoon. I walked in slowly, trying not to draw attention. I asked a receptionist if Miss Beatrice was working. She is, down in the supply room in the back. I went there. The supply room was dark, full of stacked boxes, smell of old paper. And there she was, organizing medicine bottles on a shelf. When she saw me, she jumped. "Miss, what are you doing here?" "I need to know," I said firmly. "I need to know what you were going to tell me." She looked around, desperate. "I can't. If they find out I talked, I'll lose my job, or worse. Please," I begged, grabbing her hands. "I need to know the truth. About me, about my husband, about what happened in 1962. She was silent for a long time. Then she took a deep breath. "All right," she said, her voice trembling. "But you have to promise you'll never say it was me who told." "I promise." She moved closer, looked at the door, and whispered, "That year, something happened. Something terrible. To your mother. During the birth." My heart was pounding. "What happened?" She swallowed hard. "She had twins." The world stopped. I felt my legs go weak, had to hold on to the shelf to keep from falling. "Twins?" I repeated, unable to believe it. "My mother had twins?" Miss Beatrice nodded slowly, her eyes full of pain. "Yes, honey, 2 babies, a girl and a boy." I shook my head, confused. But that doesn't make sense. I'm an only child. I've always been. I never had a brother. Never." "Because they hid it from you," she interrupted, her voice low but firm. "Hid it your whole life." My whole body trembled. "Hid what? What happened to the other baby?" She looked at the door again, afraid. Then she pulled me into an even more hidden corner between 2 tall shelves of boxes. "The boy, your brother, he didn't die like they told your mother. He was taken." I felt my blood freeze. "Taken? Taken by who?" Miss Beatrice took a deep breath, like every word weighed a ton. "By the head nurse of the maternity ward, a woman named Mary Louise Kendrick. I'd never heard that name in my life, but the way she said it, with so much fear, so much disgust, made my stomach turn. Why did she do it? Why did she steal my brother?" Miss Beatrice closed her eyes like she didn't want to relive the memory. "Because she was obsessed with your father." The air left my lungs. "My father?" She opened her eyes again, and I saw tears falling. "Your father, Jonathan Harper. He was a handsome man, hard-working, respected, and Mary Louise. She was in love with him, had been since they were young. But he never paid her any mind. Never. He only had eyes for your mother." My head was spinning. I could barely process it all. Miss Beatrice continued, "When Mary Louise found out your mother was pregnant, she went crazy with rage, told the other staff that your mother had stolen her man, that she was going to pay for it. Nobody took her seriously. We thought it was just spite. But it wasn't." She stopped, swallowed hard, like the next words burned her throat. "The day of the delivery, your mother had complications. She was bleeding badly, almost died, was unconscious for hours, and that's when That's when Mary Louise did what she did. I could barely breathe. What did she do? She took one of the babies, the boy, and told the doctors he'd died, falsified the death certificate, said the little body had been taken away to be buried. But it wasn't. She took him alive, took him far away, and gave him to someone else to raise. I felt a pain in my chest so strong I thought I'd pass out. My God in heaven. Miss Beatrice grabbed my arm. Your mother never knew. Never. When she woke up, they told her she'd had 2 babies, but the boy didn't make it. She cried for days, for weeks, but she believed it. And your father did too. Nobody questioned it, because back then we trusted doctors, trusted the papers. I started crying desperately. But why didn't anyone report it? Why didn't anyone say anything? She lowered her eyes, ashamed. Because Mary Louise had power. She was the head nurse. She threatened everyone. Said if anybody opened their mouth, she'd destroy their life. Would accuse them of theft, falsification, anything. And back then, it was easy to destroy someone like that. All it took was her word. I leaned against the wall, feeling the world collapse around me. And who did she give the baby to? Who did she give my brother to? Miss Beatrice went silent. A heavy, loaded silence. I don't know the person's name. I just know it was a woman. A woman who lived near the bus station. A woman who raised the boy like he was hers. My heart stopped. Bus station. A woman who raised the boy. Thomas had told me he was found near the bus station, that he was raised by a woman who wasn't his birth mother. No, it couldn't be. Miss Beatrice said, her voice trembling. Are you all right? I couldn't answer. Couldn't think straight. Miss Beatrice, I finally managed to say, my voice coming out almost soundless. Do you know the baby's name? The name they gave him when he was registered? She shook her head. I don't know. I didn't have access to those papers. But I know Mary Louise kept everything. She was meticulous, paranoid. She wrote everything down in a little black notebook she always carried with her. And where's that notebook now? I don't know. She died about 10 years ago. Fell down a staircase right here in the hospital. They said it was an accident, but a lot of folks think it was God's punishment. I felt a hatred so big inside me I thought I'd explode. Then there's no way to prove it, no way to know. Miss Beatrice hesitated. There is one way. I raised my eyes to her. What way? The dead files, in the back of the hospital. They have all the old records there, of all the births, all the deaths. If you look carefully enough, you might find something. My heart started racing again. Take me there, please. She went pale. I can't. If they catch me there, please, I begged, with tears streaming down my face. I need to know. I have to. She looked at me for a long moment, and then she sighed. All right, but we have to be quick and quiet. She led me through the dark corridors of the hospital. We climbed an old staircase, past abandoned rooms, until we reached a rusted iron door at the end of a lightless hallway. She pulled out a ring of keys from her pocket, searched for the right one, and opened the door with a loud creak. The smell of mold and old paper hit me like a punch. Here, she said, turning on a weak bulb hanging from the ceiling. The files from 1962 should be in those boxes in the back. There were dozens of boxes, stacked to the ceiling, dusty, some with torn lids, others sealed with old tape. I started searching, opened box after box. My fingers trembled. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. Until, in a box marked Births, January to June 1962, I found it. A file, yellowed, with someone's shaky handwriting, written in a hurry. Mother's name, Louise Harper. Date of birth, March 12, 1962. Baby 1, female. Healthy. Name registered, Grace. Baby 2, male. Death declared at 03:47 a.m. But underneath, in different handwriting, smaller, almost illegible, someone had scribbled, delivered alive, MLK. MLK Mary Louise Kendrick. I held the paper with both hands, shaking all over. My brother was alive, I whispered. He was alive, and she stole him from me. Miss Beatrice put her hand on my shoulder. I'm so sorry, honey. I'm so sorry. I looked at her, my eyes burning from crying so much. I need to find him. I need to know who he is, where he is. She shook her head, sad. After all this time, it's going to be nearly impossible. But then I remembered. I remembered Thomas. I remembered what he'd told me. Found near the bus station, raised by a woman who wasn't his mother, born in 1962. No, please, God, it can't be him. I ran out of that hospital stumbling, could barely walk straight. Miss Beatrice followed me to the door, holding my arm tight, afraid I'd collapse. Miss, do you want me to call someone? You're not well. No, I just need to get home. But I didn't go straight home. I couldn't. My head was spinning. I needed to think. Needed to put the pieces of this cursed puzzle together. I sat on a bench in the square across from the hospital. The sun was already setting, the sky turning orange, purple, then dark. And I sat there, frozen, trying to breathe. Thomas, my husband, the man I loved. He'd told me he was found near the bus station when he was a baby, in 1962, the same year I was born, raised by a woman who wasn't his birth mother, but that didn't mean anything, right? Many babies were abandoned back then. Many children were raised by other families. Didn't mean that. No, I couldn't think about it. But the more I tried to push the thought away, the more it came back. Stronger, clearer, and there was something else that started making sense in a horrible way. My mama's reaction when she first saw Thomas. Something about that boy feels familiar. And Mrs. Carter, Thomas's adoptive mother, trembling every time anyone mentioned the past. The fear in her eyes, the guilt. Some stories are safer left buried, honey. And the way she'd whispered in Thomas's ear at our wedding, forgive me. I tried. It wasn't supposed to be like this. My God, she knew. Mrs. Carter knew. She knew who Thomas really was, where he'd come from. And that's why she carried all that guilt. I stood up from the bench, my legs shaky. I needed to go to her house, needed to look her in the eyes and ask for the truth. But it was far, and it was getting dark. I'd have to go back the next day. I caught the last bus home. The whole trip was torture. Every bump in the road was a punch to the stomach. Every curve was a wave of nausea. When I got home, it was already night. Thomas was in the living room, sitting in the rocking chair, reading the paper. When he saw me, he smiled. Grace, where have you been? I was getting worried. I forced a smile. Couldn't look him in the eyes. I went to visit Cousin Rose. She's feeling poorly. Oh, poor thing. How's she doing? She'll be fine. I went into the bedroom quickly, before he could notice I was shaking. I lay on the bed fully clothed, pretended to be asleep when he came to bed beside me. But I didn't sleep. Spent the whole night awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of him on the mattress beside me, hearing his breathing, and wondering, was it possible? Could I have married my own brother? The next morning, very early, before Thomas woke up, I left a note saying I was going to the market. But I didn't go. I went straight to Mrs. Carter's house. She lived in a small house on the side of the highway, about 3 miles outside town. When I got there, everything was silent. Just the sound of birds and wind in the trees. I knocked on the door, once, twice, 3 times, no answer. Mrs. Carter, I called louder. It's Grace, I need to talk to you. Silence. I tried the doorknob. The door was unlocked. I opened it slowly. Mrs. Carter, I went inside. The house was dark, even though the sun was already high outside. Curtains closed, smell of medicine and church candles. And then I saw. She was sitting in the rocking chair, her back to the door, motionless. "Mrs. Carter?" I walked over to her, touched her shoulder. She was cold. I jumped back, stifling a scream. Dead. Mrs. Carter was dead. I trembled all over, leaned against the wall, trying not to faint. I needed to call someone, needed to... That's when I saw it, in her hand, clutched between her stiff fingers, a folded piece of paper. With my hand shaking, I took the paper, unfolded it. It was a letter, written in trembling, hurried handwriting. "Grace, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. And it's better this way. I didn't have the courage to carry this weight anymore. I need to tell you the truth. The truth I've kept all these years, with fear, with shame, with guilt. Thomas, he's not my son. Never was. I raised him, yes, but he was given to me by a nurse, a woman with hard eyes and a cold voice. She showed up at my door one night with a baby in her arms, said the baby had been abandoned, that if I didn't take him, she was going to leave him in the street to die. I didn't have children, never could. And when I saw that little baby, those little eyes looking at me, I didn't have the heart to refuse. But she made me sign papers, made me swear I'd never tell anyone, that I'd never try to find out where he came from. I raised him with love. I swear I did. But I always knew something was wrong, always felt it. And when he grew up, when he became a young man, I started to see it, to see his face. And I swore I knew that face from somewhere, until the day he brought you to meet me. Grace, when I saw you, it was like lightning struck my head. You looked just like him, the same eyes, the same smile, the same shape of the face. Twins. You two were twins, I wanted to tell. I swear I did. But I was afraid of the nurse, afraid of the police, afraid of losing Thomas, afraid you'd hate me, and then you got married. And I did nothing. I let it happen. Let you marry. Let you love each other. Let you commit a sin that wasn't your fault. I'm the one to blame, me and nobody else. Forgive me, Grace. Forgive me for stealing your brother from you. Forgive me for letting you live this lie. I can't take it anymore. Can't carry this. The nurse's name was Mary Louise Kendrick. She lived on Magnolia Street, number 47. Maybe there's still something there that proves all this. Take care of Thomas. He's not to blame for any of this. And forgive me, Dorothy Carter. I let the letter fall to the floor. My legs gave out. I fell to my knees, sobbing. It was true. It was all true. Thomas was my brother, my twin brother, stolen from me the day we were born. And I had married him. I had loved him. I had shared a bed with him. I had dreamed of having children with him. My God in heaven. What was I going to do now? I don't know how long I stayed there, on my knees, on that cold floor, beside Mrs. Carter's body, with that letter in my hand and my whole world shattered into 1,000 pieces. Time stopped meaning anything. The sun moved across the sky. Shadows shifted on the walls, and I just stayed there until I heard a sound at the door. I lifted my eyes and saw Thomas, standing in the doorway, looking at me, looking at the letter on the floor, looking at his mother, his adoptive mother, dead in the chair. And when our eyes met, I knew by the way he looked at me. He knew too. He had found out. For a moment that seemed to last forever, we just stood there, frozen. Him in the doorway, me on the floor. And the silence between us was so heavy it seemed to suck all the air from the house. Thomas came in slowly, closed the door behind him, didn't take his eyes off me. He had an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not sadness. It was like something inside him had broken, like the person he thought he was had ceased to exist. Grace. His voice came out hoarse, trembling. What's happening here? I tried to speak but couldn't. The words stuck in my throat, choked by sobs. He looked at Mrs. Carter, at her body, motionless in the rocking chair, and his face collapsed. "Mama," he whispered, stumbling to her side. "Mama, no." He knelt beside the chair, took her cold hand, pressed it against his chest. "Why, Mama? Why did you do this?" He cried like a child. And I couldn't move, couldn't console him. Because how could I? How could I touch him now, knowing what I knew? After a while, he saw the letter on the floor, next to me. He looked at me, then at the letter, and back at me. "What is that?" I didn't answer. He stood up slowly and picked up the letter, unfolded it, and started reading. I watched his face change with every line, watched the color drain, watched his eyes widen, watched his breathing become quick, labored, watched his hands start to tremble. When he finished, he let the letter fall and stood there, staring at the wall like he'd turned to stone. "Thomas," I finally managed to say, my voice weak. I found out yesterday. I went to the hospital. He turned to me, slowly, and the way he looked at me, God in heaven, the way he looked at me made me feel like everything was over. "You're my sister?" Each word came out like it was cutting his tongue, like it was poison. I could only nod. The tears started falling again. He took a step back, and then another, like I was something dangerous, something he couldn't get close to anymore. "My God," he whispered. "My God, what have we done?" "We didn't know," I shouted, standing up from the floor. "We didn't know, Thomas. Nobody told us. They hid this from us. But now we know," he shouted back, and his voice echoed through the house. "Now we know! And what do we do with this? Huh, Grace? What do we do?" He ran his hands over his face, through his hair, desperate. "I loved you. I love you." His voice broke. "How do I stop loving you now?" Those words tore me apart inside. "Thomas, no!" he shouted, backing away further. "Don't touch me! Please, don't touch me!" He fell to his knees, covering his face with his hands, sobbing loudly. "This is a punishment. This is God's punishment. We sinned without knowing. And now—" I moved closer, knelt beside him, wanted to touch him, wanted to comfort him. But I couldn't. Didn't have the right anymore. "Thomas, we didn't sin. We were victims of this evil woman who stole you from me the day we were born." He lifted his face, eyes red, swollen. "And now what? How do we live knowing this? How do I look at you again without feeling? Without feeling?" He didn't finish. But I knew what he was going to say. Disgust, guilt, shame. "I don't know," I said, my voice barely there. "I don't know, Thomas. I just know that we need to understand. Need to know everything. Because if we don't, this will destroy us." He was silent for a long time. Then he wiped his face with the back of his hand and stood up. "The letter, it mentions an address. Magnolia Street, number 47. The nurse's house." I stood up too. "We need to go there. Need to look for proof. Need to understand why she did this." He looked at me. And for the first time since he'd walked into that house, I saw something beyond pain in his eyes. I saw rage. "Let's go." We left there, leaving Mrs. Carter behind. We'd come back later to take care of her properly, but at that moment we needed answers. Magnolia Street was on the other side of town, an old neighborhood with dilapidated houses, iron gates, and abandoned gardens. Number 47 was a small house with peeling walls and windows boarded up. Looked like nobody had lived there in years. Thomas pushed the gate. It creaked loudly but opened. We walked through the overgrown yard, got to the front door, locked. Thomas looked around, picked up a rock, and broke the side window glass, unlocked it from the inside and climbed through. I followed. The smell inside was unbearable. Mold, dead rats, old paper. Everything covered in dust. Furniture still in place, like the person had left suddenly and never came back. "Let's search," Thomas said, his voice firm now. "Anything. Diary, letter, document. Anything that proves what she did." We started going through everything. Drawers, cabinets, trunks, boxes, paper by paper, photo by photo. Until, in an old dresser in the bedroom, under a pile of moldy clothes, I found it. A small black notebook, with a worn leather cover. I opened it with trembling hands, and there it was, page after page, written in small, nervous handwriting. Dates, names, descriptions. I flipped through until I found the date I was looking for. March 12th, 1962. And there it was written, with details that made me feel sick. Louise gave birth today. 2 babies. Perfect. Healthy. But she doesn't deserve them. She never deserved Jonathan. He was mine. Always mine. But she took him from me. So I'm going to take something from her. I took the boy, said he died, falsified everything. Nobody suspected. Gave him to Dorothy Carter. She's foolish enough not to ask questions. Made her sign a paper saying she'll never tell. Now Louise will suffer for the rest of her life. Will carry the pain of losing a child. And I'll carry the satisfaction of knowing I destroyed her happiness. Jonathan will never know he lost a son because of me. And that's what gives me the most pleasure. I closed the notebook hard, felt a wave of hatred so big I thought I'd vomit. "Thomas, look at this." He took the notebook, read it, and his face got whiter and whiter. When he finished, he threw the notebook on the floor so hard it hit the wall. "She destroyed our lives," he screamed. "Destroyed our lives because of a sick obsession." He punched the wall, punched again and again, until his hand was bleeding. "Thomas, stop!" I grabbed his arm. "Stop, please!" He stopped, panting, looking at his bleeding hand. "Grace," he whispered. "What do we do now?" I hugged him, hugged my brother, my husband, the person I loved, the person I could no longer love. "We survive," I said, crying on his shoulder. "We find a way to survive." And there, in that cursed house, holding each other in the midst of pain and truth, we cried for everything we'd lost, for everything we could never have. We left that house with the black notebook in our hands, physical proof of the evil that had shaped our lives, proof that we were innocent, that we'd just been pieces in a cruel game we never asked to play. But even with the proof, even knowing the truth, the pain didn't diminish. We walked in silence through the empty streets. The sun was setting, the sky turning blood red, and we walked side by side, but without touching. Like now, there was an abyss between us. When we got near home, Thomas stopped. "I can't go in there," he said, looking at our little house. "Can't sleep in that bed again. Can't pretend everything's okay." I understood, because I felt the same. "Then what are we going to do?" He ran his hand through his hair, desperate. "I don't know, Grace. I don't know." We stood there, stopped on the corner, like two strangers who'd shared everything, and who now had nothing. Should we tell someone?" I asked, my voice weak. "Tell who?" he answered, bitter. "Your mama? The whole town? So everybody can look at us with disgust? But Thomas, we didn't do anything wrong." "Everybody will say we did," he shouted. "Everybody will point. Everybody will talk. Look there, the 2 who got married without knowing they were siblings. You think anybody's going to have mercy on us?" He was right. I knew he was. Back then, in a small place like ours, a story like this would be the end of any chance at a normal life. We'd be marked forever, be driven out, be treated like freaks. "So," I said, swallowing my tears, "we just end it? We just separate and pretend nothing happened?" Thomas looked at me, and in his eyes I saw so much pain, my heart shattered. There's no other choice, Grace. But I love you, I said, letting the tears fall. I love you, Thomas, and that won't change just because I found out you're my brother. I can't erase what I feel. He closed his eyes, clenching his fists. I love you too. But we can't. We can't be together anymore. It's wrong. It's a sin. A sin by who? I shouted. Mary Louise's sin. The sin of whoever hid this from us. We just loved. We were just happy. But now we know the truth, he shouted back, and we can't ignore it anymore. We can't. He turned his back, covered his face with his hands. I'm leaving, Grace, leaving town, going far away, going to try to forget, going to try to live with this. My world collapsed. No, don't do that. Please. He turned to me, eyes red, destroyed. It's better this way. For me. For you. For everybody. Thomas! I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm sorry for everything. And he walked away, walking fast, without looking back. I stood there, stopped in the street, watching him disappear into the darkness, watching my husband, my brother, my love, leave me. And I did nothing to stop him, because I knew he was right. There was no way to continue. Not after the truth. In the days that followed, the whole town learned about Mrs. Carter's death. They said it was her heart, that she died peacefully in her sleep. Nobody read the letter. Nobody suspected anything. And Thomas disappeared. He packed his things in the middle of the night and left. Didn't leave an address, didn't leave a message, just vanished, like he'd never existed. I stayed in that little house, alone, trying to pick up the pieces of a life that had turned to dust. My mama came to visit, sat beside me on the porch, held my hand. He left you? She asked, her voice soft, worried. I didn't answer. Couldn't tell her the truth. Couldn't destroy her too. Sometimes, she continued, sometimes things don't work out, sweetheart. But life goes on. You're strong. You'll get through this. If she only knew. If she only knew that the son she'd mourned for years had been stolen, that he'd grown up just miles away from her, that he'd married his own sister without knowing. But I didn't tell her. I kept the secret, like Mrs. Carter had kept it, like Mary Louise had kept it. Because some truths are too heavy to carry. Months passed. I sold the little house, took the money and left town, went to live in another state, started a new life, a new job, almost a new name. I tried to forget. But how do you forget? How do you forget his face, his touch, his laugh? How do you forget that you were happy in the arms of the wrong person? I never dated anyone else, never remarried, didn't want to, because deep down in my heart, I still loved him. And that never changed. Even now, 60 years later, I still love him. I know it's wrong. I know I shouldn't. But the heart doesn't obey what's right or wrong. It just feels. Years later, already old, already tired, I went back to the town, just to visit my parents' graves, and it was there, in the cemetery, that I saw it. A new grave, recent, with his name on it. Thomas Miller, 1943, 2010. He had died. My brother, my husband, my love, had died, and I hadn't even known. I knelt in front of the grave, my legs weak, my body aching. Thomas, I whispered, running my hand over the cold stone. Did you manage to forget? Did you manage to be happy? The wind blew, shaking the trees around me, and I swore I heard his voice whisper back, never forgot, never stopped loving you. I cried there, at that grave, like I hadn't cried in years, cried for everything we'd lost, for everything that had been stolen from us, for a whole lifetime of love that was destroyed by a lie. And when I stood up, wiped my tears and said, "We'll meet on the other side, my love. There, we can just be siblings, or just lovers, or just two souls who loved each other without guilt. And I left, carrying with me the weight of this story, the weight of an impossible love, of a secret that could never be told, and of a truth that destroyed everything. I went back to my house after that visit to the cemetery, the small house where I lived alone, far from everything, far from everyone. A simple house with a wooden porch and a garden I tended with care. It was all I had: flowers, silence, and memories. Memories I kept locked deep in my chest. But that night, after seeing his grave, something inside me changed. It wasn't relief. It wasn't peace. It was like a door had opened. A door I thought I'd locked forever. I sat in the rocking chair on the porch, a cup of tea in my hands, looking at the dark sky full of stars. And that's when I started thinking about everything that had happened, about all the pain, all the love, all the injustice. And I asked myself, is it really over? Because there was something I'd never told anyone, something I'd kept to myself all these years, alone, in secret. Something that changed everything. A few months after Thomas left, after he disappeared from my life, I started feeling something strange. Morning sickness, dizziness, fatigue. At first, I thought it was sadness, depression. I thought my body was reacting to the pain of losing him. But it wasn't. I was pregnant with Thomas's child. When I found out, I froze, sitting on the edge of the bed, holding the test result, shaking all over. A baby. Our baby. A child of 2 siblings. My God. I thought about doing something. Thought about not letting that baby be born. Because how could I raise a child like that? How could I explain? How could I look at that child and not see sin? Not see the mistake we'd made without knowing? But I couldn't take that baby from me. Because deep down, I knew that baby wasn't to blame for anything. Just like Thomas and I weren't. So I let it be born. Alone. Hidden. Far from everyone. I had my son in a small town in another state where nobody knew me. Registered him with my last name. Made up a story that the father had died in an accident. And I raised him. My son. Our son. He grew up beautiful, healthy, smart, with his father's eyes, with his father's smile. Every time I looked at him, my heart broke and mended at the same time. Because he was living proof of the love I felt. But he was also the constant reminder that that love was forbidden. I never told him the truth. Never. I just said his father had been a good man who had loved me, but life had separated us, and he grew up believing that. Today my son is 60 years old. He's married, has children, has grandchildren. And I'm an 80-year-old woman, sitting on the porch, drinking tea, looking at the sky, and carrying this secret that nobody else knows. Because Mrs. Carter died. My mama died without knowing the truth. Thomas died, and Mary Louise died without ever paying for what she did. Only I know. Only I carried this weight all the way here. But now that I've seen his grave, now that I know he's gone, I feel like I need to tell, even if it's just to myself, to leave it recorded, so that someone, someday, understands what happened to us. That's why I started writing, started putting it all on paper, every detail, every moment, every pain. And now that I've finished, now that I've put down the last word, I feel light. Not happy, but light. Because finally, the truth is here. In words, in ink. And even if nobody reads it, even if this stays locked in a drawer for 100 years, the truth exists. And that's enough for me. I took the notebook where I'd written everything, closed it, put it in an old wooden box, along with Mary Louise's black notebook, Mrs. Carter's letter, and a photograph. The only photograph I'd kept of Thomas, a photo of us on our wedding day, smiling, happy, innocent. I closed the box, locked it with a small key, and wrote on the lid, "The truth nobody wanted to hear. I'll leave this box for my grandchildren, not for my son. He doesn't need to know. He doesn't deserve to carry this, but for the grandchildren, for when I'm no longer here, for when enough time has passed that the pain won't be so strong, and maybe they'll understand. Maybe they'll look at Thomas and me with compassion, with pity, with love, and not with judgment." I stood up from the rocking chair, picked up the box, and took it to the old wardrobe in my bedroom, put it way in the back, behind the blankets, behind the old clothes, and when I closed the wardrobe door, I felt like I'd closed a chapter, the last chapter, of a story that should never have happened, but that did, and that marked me forever. I went back to the porch, sat down again, looked at the sky, and whispered, "Thomas, wherever you are, I hope you found peace. I hope you didn't suffer as much as I did, and I hope that one day when I get to the other side, we can look at each other without guilt, without pain, without shame, just two souls who loved each other and who were destroyed by a lie." The wind blew again, and I swore I felt an invisible hand touch my shoulder, gentle, loving, the way he used to. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in 60 years, I smiled. But the story wasn't quite over yet, because deep in that box, beneath all those papers, there was one more thing, one more secret, one I hadn't even written down yet, because I'd only just found out myself. I thought I could live with it, thought I could take that secret to my grave and finally have peace. But peace never came. Because 3 days ago, something happened, something that pulled me right back into that nightmare I thought I'd escaped. I was sitting on my porch, same as always, when a car pulled up in front of my house. A black sedan, official looking. 2 people got out, a man in a dark suit and a woman carrying a briefcase. They walked up to my gate, and the woman called out, "Mrs. Miller? Grace Miller?" I hadn't used that name in decades. Hearing it spoken out loud made my blood run cold. "I'm Grace Harper," I said, my voice shaky. "I haven't been Grace Miller in a very long time." "May we come in, ma'am? We're from the Georgia State Records Office. We need to speak with you about something important." My heart started pounding. I wanted to say no, wanted to send them away, but something in the woman's eyes told me this wasn't going away. "All right," I said, "come up." They sat on my porch chairs. The woman opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. "Mrs. Harper," she began gently, "we're investigating a series of irregularities at the Old St. Mary's Hospital in Brunswick, irregularities that date back to the 1960s. My hands started trembling. "We've been going through old records," the man added, "and we found documentation related to your birth, March 12, 1962. I couldn't speak. The woman pulled out a yellowed document. "According to hospital records, your mother, Louise Harper, gave birth to twins that day. A girl, you, and a boy. The boy was declared deceased at 3:47 a.m. "I know," I whispered. "I know about that." They exchanged glances. "Mrs. Harper," the woman continued, "we have reason to believe the boy didn't die. We believe he was illegally removed from the hospital by a nurse named Mary Louise Kendrick." I closed my eyes. Here it was. The truth I'd buried was being dug up by strangers. "We know," the man said softly. "We know you found out. We found Mrs. Dorothy Carter's letter in the hospital archives. And we found Mary Louise's notebook in her abandoned house." Tears started falling down my face. "Then you know," I said. "You know what she did to us." "We do," the woman said, "and we're deeply sorry. What happened to you and your brother was a terrible crime." "Thomas," I whispered. "His name was Thomas." "Yes, Thomas Miller. We found his death certificate. He passed in 2010. I nodded, unable to speak, but then the man leaned forward. "Mrs. Harper, there's something else. Something we only discovered last week. I looked up at him. What? The woman pulled out another document. This one looked newer, clinical. We've been conducting DNA analysis on stored tissue samples from that era. It's part of a broader investigation into infant abductions, and we found something unusual. My chest tightened. What did you find? She hesitated, then said, according to the genetic analysis, you and Thomas Miller shared the same mother, but you didn't share the same father. The world tilted. What? It's extremely rare, the man explained, but it happens. It's called heteroparental superfecundation. It occurs when a woman releases 2 eggs during the same cycle, and each egg is fertilized by sperm from a different man. I couldn't breathe. Are you saying? Yes, the woman said gently. Your mother had twins, but each baby had a different father. One baby, either you or Thomas, was fathered by Jonathan Harper. The other was fathered by someone else. My mind was spinning so fast I thought I'd pass out. Who? I managed to ask. Who was the other father? They looked at each other again. We don't know yet, the man said. But we're working on it. We're trying to cross-reference records, interview people who knew your mother back then. My mother's dead, I said flatly. She died 20 years ago. She never told me anything. We know, the woman said, but there might be others who knew. Neighbors, friends, hospital staff. I stood up suddenly, my chair scraping loud against the wood. Stop, I said. Just stop. They looked up at me, confused. Mrs. Harper. No, I said, my voice stronger now. I don't want to know. I don't want you digging anymore. I don't want you talking to people, asking questions, dragging this nightmare back into the light. But Mrs. Harper, the man said gently, don't you want to know the truth? Don't you want to know if you and Thomas were actually related by blood or not? I looked at him, really looked at him. It doesn't matter, I said. We grew up thinking we were strangers. We fell in love. We got married. And then we found out we were twins. That destroyed us. That ended everything. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand. Now you're telling me maybe we weren't even full siblings? That maybe we could have been together after all? What am I supposed to do with that information? Thomas is dead. He died thinking we'd committed a terrible sin. He died carrying that guilt. My voice broke. And now you want to tell me it might not have even been true? That we destroyed our lives for nothing? The woman stood up, reached toward me. Mrs. Harper, I understand this is painful. You don't understand anything, I shouted. You don't understand what it's like to love someone so much it hurts, and then have that love ripped away because you find out you're related. You don't understand what it's like to carry a secret for 60 years, alone, with nobody to talk to, nobody to help you. I was shaking now, crying hard. And you definitely don't understand what it's like to find out, after the person you loved is dead and buried, that maybe you could have been together all along. The porch was silent except for my sobs. Finally, the woman spoke, very softly. Mrs. Harper, there's one more thing you should know. I looked at her through my tears. What? She pulled out one last document. According to our investigation, there may have been a third baby. I froze. What? The medical notes from your mother's delivery mention unusual fetal positioning and possible additional gestational material removed. At the time, they didn't have the technology to understand what that meant. But now, with modern analysis, what are you saying? I whispered. We believe your mother may have been pregnant with triplets, not twins, 3 babies, and if one was taken by Mary Louise and you survived, there may be another sibling out there. Somewhere. My legs gave out. I sank back into my chair. No, I whispered. No, that's not possible. We're not certain, the man said quickly. It's just a theory based on the medical notes. But we wanted you to know, because if there is a third person out there, they deserve to know the truth too. I buried my face in my hands. I can't, I said. I can't do this again. I can't go looking for more family, more secrets, more pain. The woman knelt beside my chair. Mrs. Harper, Grace, you don't have to do anything, but we need your permission to continue the investigation, to try to find out the full truth, not just for you, but for anyone else who might have been affected by Mary Louise's crimes. I looked at her kind eyes, at the folder in her hands full of documents that could rewrite my entire life. And I thought about Thomas, about the life we could have had, about the son I'd raised alone who never knew his father, about the possibility that somewhere out there was another person carrying pieces of this story. I need time, I finally said. I need to think. They nodded and stood. Take all the time you need, the woman said. Here's my card. Call me when you're ready, or if you're never ready, that's okay too. They left, and I sat there on my porch, holding that card, watching the sun set, thinking about truth, about lies, about love, and about whether some secrets are better left buried, or whether the dead deserve to have their stories told, even if telling those stories breaks the living all over again. I sat there until the stars came out, until the crickets started singing, until the night wrapped around me like a blanket. And I still didn't know what to do. Because how do you choose between protecting yourself and honoring the truth? How do you decide whether to open a door that might lead to more pain? How do you live with the possibility that everything you thought you knew was wrong? I looked up at the stars, and I whispered, Thomas, what would you want me to do? The wind blew gently through the trees, and in that wind, I swore I heard his voice one more time. Tell the truth, Grace. Always tell the truth, even when it hurts. I closed my eyes and made my decision. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my porch until dawn, watching the darkness slowly turn to gray, then pink, then gold. The card from the state records office was still in my hand, slightly crumpled from how tightly I'd been holding it. By the time the sun came up, I knew what I had to do. I went inside, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat at my kitchen table, picked up the phone, dialed the number on the card. She answered on the second ring. Grace? Just hearing her say my name made my hands shake. I'll help you, I said. I'll tell you everything I know, but I need something in return. Anything. When you find out the truth, the whole truth, you tell me first, before you tell anyone else, before it becomes public record. I need to know before the world knows. There was a pause. I can do that, she said. I promise. Then come back tomorrow and bring everything you have. Over the next 3 weeks, they came to my house almost every day, bringing documents, medical records, photographs. We went through everything together, every detail of that terrible day in 1962, every note Mary Louise had made, every lie she'd told, and slowly, piece by piece, the truth began to emerge. My mother had been young when she got pregnant, only 22, and according to hospital records, she'd come in for her first prenatal appointment unusually late, almost 4 months along. The doctors had noted something strange even then. The pregnancy seemed more advanced than it should have been based on her dates. The measurements were off. The heartbeat patterns were unusual. But in 1962, they didn't have the technology to know what that meant. They just assumed she was wrong about her dates. But she wasn't wrong. According to the genetic analysis they'd done on preserved tissue samples, my mother had indeed been pregnant with twins. And those twins did have different fathers. The investigator, her name was Patricia, sat across from me at my kitchen table and explained it gently. Your mother released 2 eggs in one cycle. One was fertilized by your father, Jonathan Harper. That baby, that was you, Grace. I held my breath. The other egg was fertilized by someone else. We don't know who yet, but that baby, that was Thomas. Tears streamed down my face. So we weren't really brother and sister? You were half-siblings, Patricia said softly. You shared a mother, but not a father. But we didn't know, I whispered. We spent our whole lives thinking we were full twins. We destroyed our marriage because of it. Thomas died believing he'd committed an unforgivable sin. Patricia reached across the table and took my hand. I'm so sorry, Grace. I'm so sorry you both went through that. I cried then. Cried harder than I had in years. Cried for Thomas, for the life we could have had, for the decades we'd lost. But Patricia wasn't done. Grace, she said quietly, there's more. I looked up at her through my tears. The medical notes mention additional fetal material that was removed during your mother's delivery. At the time, they thought it was just placental tissue. But based on the genetic markers we found, she pulled out another document. We believe there was a third embryo, not a full fetus. It stopped developing very early in the pregnancy, probably in the first trimester. It's called a vanishing twin. It happens when one embryo is reabsorbed by the mother's body. My heart was pounding. So there were 3. But only 2 survived to birth. Exactly. You and Thomas. One fathered by Jonathan Harper. One fathered by someone else. But who? I asked desperately. Who was Thomas's father? Patricia hesitated. We've been cross-referencing hospital records with employment records from that time, and we found something. She pulled out a photograph, black and white, faded, a man in a white coat, young, handsome, standing in front of St. Mary's Hospital. This is Dr. William Kendrick. He was a resident at St. Mary's in 1961 and 1962. I stared at the photograph. Kendrick? Yes, Mary Louise Kendrick's younger brother. The room started spinning. According to hospital staff we interviewed, your mother came in for a prenatal appointment in the spring of 1961. Dr. Kendrick was the one who saw her, and there were rumors, unconfirmed but persistent, that he was known for being inappropriate with female patients. I felt sick. Are you saying... We believe Dr. Kendrick may have assaulted your mother during that appointment, and that Thomas was the result. I couldn't breathe. And Mary Louise knew? We think so. We think that's part of why she stole Thomas. Not just because she was obsessed with your father, but because Thomas was her nephew, her brother's son, and she wanted to protect her family's reputation. Everything was crashing down around me. So when she gave Thomas to Mrs. Carter, she was hiding what her brother had done. Yes, I sat there in silence for a long time. Then I asked the question I'd been afraid to ask. Does this mean Thomas and I weren't actually related at all? If I was Jonathan's daughter and he was Dr. Kendrick's son? Patricia looked at me with so much compassion it hurt. Genetically? No, you weren't related by blood. You shared a mother, but you had different fathers. You weren't siblings at all. The weight of those words crushed me. So, we could have been together, I whispered. We could have stayed married, had a normal life, been happy. Yes. I put my head down on the table and sobbed. All those years, all that pain, all that guilt. For nothing. We'd destroyed our lives over a lie that Mary Louise had created, a lie that had poisoned everything. When I finally stopped crying, I looked up at Patricia. What happens now? Now, she said, we document everything. We add it to the official record, and we try to find out if there are other victims, other babies Mary Louise might have stolen, other families she destroyed. And what about me? I asked. What do I do with this information? Patricia squeezed my hand. That's up to you, Grace. You can keep it private, or you can tell your story. Help other people who might be going through something similar. I thought about my son, about my grandchildren, about the box I'd hidden in the back of my wardrobe. I need to tell my son, I said. He deserves to know the truth about his father, about who Thomas really was. I think that's wise. I stood up, walked to my bedroom, and pulled out the old wooden box, brought it back to the kitchen table. This, I said, is everything I've kept all these years. Thomas's photograph, Mary Louise's notebook, Mrs. Carter's letter, and my own written account of what happened. I opened the box and looked at Thomas's face in that wedding photo. Young, happy, innocent. "I'm going to give this to my grandchildren," I said, "along with everything you found, so they'll know the whole truth, the real truth." Patricia nodded. "I think that's beautiful, Grace." I closed the box and looked out the window at the morning sun. "You know what the hardest part is?" I asked. "What?" "Knowing that if we just waited, if we just asked more questions, if someone had told us the truth sooner, Thomas and I could have had a lifetime together." I wiped my eyes. "But we didn't get that, because one bitter woman decided to play God with our lives, and by the time we found out the truth, it was too late." I looked at Patricia. "Promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll find everyone she hurt, every family she destroyed, and you'll tell them the truth, all of it, so nobody else has to live with lies the way we did." "I promise," Patricia said. "I swear to you, Grace, we'll find them all." She stood to leave, but at the door, she turned back. "Grace, for what it's worth, the love you and Thomas shared was real. It was pure, and nothing, not Mary Louise, not the circumstances, not even the truth, can take that away from you." I smiled through my tears. "Thank you." After she left, I sat on my porch with the box in my lap, and I whispered to the wind, "Thomas, I hope you can hear me. I hope you know now that we weren't wrong to love each other. We were just two people who got caught in someone else's evil. But our love was real." The wind blew softly, and I added one more thing to the box, a letter, to my grandchildren, to anyone who might read this someday. It said, "This is the story of two people who loved each other against impossible odds, who were torn apart by lies and died believing they'd sinned, but they hadn't. They were innocent, and their love was the most beautiful thing in a world full of ugliness. If you're reading this, remember, truth matters, lies destroy, and love, real love, is worth fighting for, no matter what the world tells you. Tell your truth. Always. Even when it hurts." I sealed the box, and I finally felt peace. Not happiness, not joy, but peace, because the truth was out, and Thomas's memory was cleared. And somewhere, somehow, I believed he knew. And you, reading this story, do you have a secret you've been carrying? A truth you're afraid to tell? Maybe it's time to let it out, because secrets have a way of destroying us from the inside. But truth sets us free, even when it hurts.